What if civilization began not because we farmed, but because we prayed together in stone? Beneath the barren slopes of southeastern Turkey lies a landscape that looks normal by day and impossible by moonlight. Farmers here once broke the surface and found a circle of massive stone pillars, then a subterranean hall, then a strange tiered structure carved into bedrock. This is not a legend. This is Karahan Tepe, a complex of stone temples and villages that may be older than agriculture, older than cities, and older than the story we've been told about ourselves. For most of human history, the script was simple. First came hunting and gathering, then came farming, then came villages, then cities, then temples, then writing, then empires. The machine of progress turned in that order. But dig into Turkey's Şanlıurfa province and you find a different timeline. You find stone pillars more than 10,000 years old, carved with faces, with animals, with symbols that look like the dawn of meaning. You find a structure that feels like an early amphitheater, like a place where people gathered to watch, to listen, to feel something bigger than survival. Archaeologists call this the pre-pottery Neolithic. To the rest of us it sounds like prehistory. Yet the stones at Karahan Tepe carry fingerprints of social organization that should not be there. This is not a scattering of rocks. This is a planned arrangement. This is a center. The T-shaped pillars are not random. They are aligned. They are repeated. They are repeated with such precision that they feel like a language written in stone long before language had letters. The carvings are not crude scratches. They are detailed, almost intimate depictions of animals. Snakes, scorpions, boars, birds, each with a presence that feels deliberate, even sacred. For decades, the first complex societies were said to have sprung up in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley. The narrative was tidy. Fertile land, rivers, the rise of grain, the rise of cities, the rise of kings. But Karahan Tepe and its more famous sibling Göbekli Tepe nearby refuse that narrative. They sit in a region that is dry. They sit in a place where wild cereals were present but not yet domesticated. They sit in a landscape that would have been easier to pass through than to settle permanently. And yet people did settle. They terraced slopes, they carved rock, they arranged stone in circles and arcs and chambers that feel like places of gathering, not just storage. The most unsettling detail is this. No evidence of large-scale farming has been found at these early layers. No sickles, no silos, no grinding stones in the numbers you would expect if this were a bread-making society. Instead, the evidence points to hunter-gatherers who organized on a level that should be impossible for simple bands of foragers. How do you feed teams of carvers, planners, overseers, and caretakers if your food supply is still wild and seasonal? How do you convince people to abandon the flexibility of the nomadic life for the hard labor of quarries and stone hauling if you have no permanent surplus? The answer archaeologists are now considering is that something else provided the surplus. Belief. Temple first, city later. The idea is heretical to the old model, but it is hard to ignore what the ground says. Radiocarbon dates place Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe between roughly 9600 and 9000 BCE. That is thousands of years before the pyramids, before the ziggurats, before Stonehenge. The pillars at Karahan Tepe stand embedded in a site that may be the earliest known human village, with homes built among the monuments, not away from them. Sacred and secular spaces grow up together. Ritual and daily life are not separated by centuries but by steps. A person could walk from their stone-lined house to a stone-lined temple in less time than it takes us to walk to a coffee shop. Imagine that world. No books, no written laws, no centralized bureaucracy, no coins, no armies as we know them. Yet there is organization, there is coordination, there is a shared aesthetic, a shared set of symbols, a shared set of rules. The carvings are not random graffiti. They are repeated motifs. They are patterns. The human-like faces, the stylized animals, the abstract shapes. These are not one-off experiments. They are repeated enough to feel like a visual language. The same way modern logos shape our cities, these symbols may have shaped the minds of people who saw them every day. There is a chamber at Karahan Tepe that looks like a natural amphitheater. Layered, tiered stone steps curve inward, almost like an early Greek theatre, carved not by craftsmen, but by the earth and then shaped by hands. How does a hunter-gatherer culture invent a space that feels like a crowd-pleasing stage? One explanation is that gatherings mattered more than we assumed. Ceremonies, rituals, initiation rites, feasts. These events may have been the glue that held large groups together. The ability to gather hundreds of people in one place, to align them around a central feature, to make them feel like part of something bigger. This is a political tool as much as a religious one. The power of a shared sacred space is that it can turn a collection of bands into a proto-nation. It can create a shared identity. It can establish a hierarchy of priests, carvers, planners, storytellers. The carvings at Karahan Tepe suggest a fascination with danger. Snakes, scorpions, predators. They also suggest a fascination with fertility. Phallic shapes, animal hybrid forms, scenes that hint at birth and death. The symbolism is not innocent decoration. It is a psychological toolkit. It is a way of teaching people what to fear, what to respect, what to desire. The message is not written in words but in patterns that burn into the retina. Modern societies worry about misinformation spreading through social media. Ancient societies may have worried about the wrong stories spreading through ritual spaces. The layout of these sites suggests that whoever designed them knew how to control the flow of people, the direction of eyes, the hierarchy of viewpoints. Some stones are meant to be seen from the center, some from the edges, some from below, some from above. The architecture is choreography for the gaze. When you stand in the center of a circular enclosure, every pillar becomes a witness, every carving a judge, every person a participant in the same performance. This is where the story becomes unsettling. The old model said that agriculture created surplus. Surplus created specialization, specialization created hierarchy, and hierarchy created temples. But Karahan Tepe suggests the opposite chain of events. The ability to organize people for a shared ritual created hierarchy. Hierarchy created the labor force created the monuments. And then perhaps the monuments created the need for a stable food supply. In other words, belief may have been the engine of civilization, not the afterthought. The temple may have come first, and the city second, and the empire third. If that is true, then the story of human progress is not a story of technology, but of storytelling. The real breakthrough was not the plow or the wheel, but the capacity to tell a story so powerful that people would give up their freedom to live for it. The ability to promise order, meaning, and protection in exchange for obedience may have been the first true technology. The stones at Karahan Tepe are not just monuments, they are evidence of a cognitive leap. These people could imagine a future large enough to justify permanent structures. They could imagine a community large enough to need organization. They could imagine a cosmos complex enough to demand explanation. The visual language of Karahan Tepe feels alien and familiar at the same time. The human-like faces with blank eyes or hollow sockets stare out from the stone with a gaze that is both serene and ominous. They are not quite faces, not quite masks, not quite gods. They are placeholders for something that cannot be fully represented. The animal carvings are more than animals. They are archetypes. The snake is not just a snake. It is danger, transformation, the underworld. The scorpion is not just a scorpion. It is death, precision, inevitability. The boar is not just a boar. It is power, aggression, the wild that cannot be tamed. These symbols are operating on the same level as the logos of modern religions, flags and brands. They are compressing complex ideas into simple images. What makes Karahan Tepe feel forbidden is not that it contradicts the Bible or the Quran, it contradicts the secular myth of steady material progress. The popular story of history is that we climbed out of ignorance, slowly, rational step by rational step. Karahan Tepe suggests that prehistoric people were not primitive. They were different. They may have had less technology, but they had more imagination, more organization, more capacity for collective ritual than the old model allowed. The site is not a primitive placeholder. It is a sophisticated social experiment laid in stone. The question that keeps archaeologists awake is this: why did these sites get buried? At Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe alike, the monuments were deliberately covered, filled in with stone and soil, as if someone did not want them to be seen. Was it a shift in belief? A collapse of a hierarchical system? A fear that the old gods were too dangerous? Or was it a conscious act of erasure, a way to bury the past and start anew? The fact that people chose to bury the very structures they had labored for hints at a turning point in human consciousness. The era of elaborate stone temples may have been deliberately abandoned, not because people forgot how to build them, but because they chose a different way to organize themselves. Fast forward to today, and the world feels again on the edge of rewriting its own story. People are questioning the narratives of progress, the promises of technology, the stability of institutions. The same skepticism that drives interest in ancient aliens and alternative history also drives interest in Karahan Tepe. The site is not proof of lost advanced technology, but it is proof that the past is far stranger than the textbooks suggest. It is proof that societies can rise and fall, beliefs can change, and stones can outlast the stories built on them. It is also proof that the power of place matters. Even though the rituals are gone, the architecture still shapes the way we see. When you walk through Karahan Tepe now, you are not just walking through history. You are walking through the original design of community. The stones tell you where to stand, where to look, where to feel small, and where to feel part of a crowd. The same principles are used in modern stadiums, churches, government squares, and shopping malls. The human need for shared space, for collective meaning, for symbolic architecture has not changed. Only the materials and the scale have. If civilization began with shared belief rather than with shared food, then the most important question is not when we invented agriculture, but when we invented truth. When did we decide that some stories were sacred and others were lies? When did we decide that certain people were allowed to shape those stories and others were not? The faces carved into the stone at Karahan Tepe may have been the first faces behind the curtain. They may have been the first priests, the first politicians, the first storytellers who realized that if you control the narrative, you control the tribe. The irony is that today we claim to be freer than those ancient people. We have the internet, books, universities, open debate, and yet we are still guided by invisible architectures, social media algorithms, brands, political slogans, nationalist myths. The stones may be gone, replaced by pixels and concrete, but the principle remains the same. Whoever controls the shared space controls the imagination. The amphitheaters of Karahan Tepe have mutated into stadiums, into screens, into feeds. The rituals have changed, but the hunger for belonging has not. If you stand at Karahan Tepe and look around, you are standing at a crossroads of time. You are standing at a place where hunter-gatherers chose to stop moving, to build, to carve, to gather. They chose to trade flexibility for permanence, mobility for monument. They chose to trade risk for meaning. The question their stones silently ask us is this: have we traded our own freedom for meaning in new ways? Are the temples of our age, our media, our algorithms,